Catherine Gallivan is a projects assistant at MIT Lewis Music Library, where she works to inventory the audio and video recordings of MIT music performances held by the MIT libraries. She received her bachelor's of music from Berklee College of Music, her diploma in advanced piano technology from North Bennett Street School. When not working on digitization projects, Gallivan tunes pianos to equal temperament throughout the greater Boston area. and many of you know Peter Munstedt is the music librarian at MIT, a position he has held since 1992. He has conducted editorial work for various publications, including the ARSC Journal Music Reference Service Quarterly and the NEMLA's Basic Manual Series. In 2012, he authored Money for the Asking Fundraisings in the Music Libraries, a book in the Basic Manual Series. Peter also served as chair of NEMLA. Do you remember what year? Do you remember what year? It was in the dark ages. Tricia Patterson is the National Digital Stewardship resident at MIT Libraries and a recent MLIS graduate from Simmons College. While at Simmons, she focused on digital preservation, working as an editorial assistant for preservation, digital technology, and culture, and as a programs facilitator for Simmons Digital Stewardship Certificate. She worked at several other Boston area institutions and repositories such as Harvard University, Boston Atheneum, and the JFK Library, honing her interest in digital preservations. And without further ado, thank you.
Thank you. That was a great session this morning, and it's a tough act to follow. I feel like we should all be up here playing ukuleles for a long time. So we'll try to do our best. It's quite a contrast to go from ukulele music to digital audio, but we'll try. I'm here really just to introduce this session and try to give you a little context and history of how this project got started. And I was thinking maybe the best way to explain this to you is to talk about my to-do list. I have a list of things I need to do. And you probably all do this too. And you know, it's great. It changes every day, every week. And it's fun to cross off the things you've accomplished. I have a confession to make here. For 20 years, I had an item at the bottom of my to-do list that never got crossed off. And it just kind of stayed there. And that's our library's collection of reel-to-reel tapes and audio cassette tapes. And I knew I should be doing something about it, and I always felt kind of guilty that I never got to cross it out or even work on it. And it just kind of remained there. And the problem is, this wasn't just trash or recordings we just get rid of. These were MIT music performances, mostly from the 1950s into the 1990s. And these recordings include MIT student groups, faculty recitals, outside artists coming in to perform. So they're really historically important. And they do document a good part of music history at MIT. They're mostly reel-to-reel tapes, audio cassette tapes. There's also some LP recordings and a few VHS tapes. Also some unique copies. So that was even more pressure to do something like this. And the only thing I did a few years ago, we had the MIT Symphony Orchestra tapes, and we digitized about 70 of those. So we did a little bit of work, but really not that much. So the rest of the recordings, they're just uncatalogued, inaccessible, and the tapes are slowly deteriorating. And yet, that remained at the bottom of my to-do list. And this may sound familiar to some of you who have similar type collections. So the problem is, to deal with this, of course, it takes money. It takes money and staffing to treat this stuff. And so for us, about 2 years ago, things started to change. And things started to come together, and we started working with these recordings. And suddenly this item was higher up on my list, and it was one of the top things on my list now, and that's something I'm currently working on. So how did this get started? Well, it got started through fundraising. Okay, everything starts with fundraising. Don't get me going on fundraising. Talk to me about that later. But it did help for us. We found some donors who provided money so that we could start dealing with the recordings. And in 2013, we started a digital audio project. It became known as the Digital Audio Music Project, DAMP. We love acronyms in MIT. DAMP for short. And it became a very active project. In July of 2013, we hired Cate to work 30 hours a week on this project. And in her first year, she inventoried our analog MIT recordings. And this was no small feat. This was a lot to do. Because for one thing, we didn't know how many we had. We didn't know if we had hundreds or thousands. They were located in different parts of the campus or off campus. So it was a lot of digging for Cate. She'll explain to you in a few minutes what she worked on. Around this time, too, the MIT libraries were setting digital priorities for fiscal year 2015. And one of their priorities was digital audio. So that was great for us. That meant that we could go to other staff members in the library system and get help from them. So that was a nice thing to happen at that time. And then more good news, in September of 2014, we hired Tricia here, Tricia Patterson, and she's hired for 9 months as a member of the National Digital Stewardship Residency. It's the NDSR for the Boston area. And she works full-time now on the digital audio project. And I should point out that the person that actually obtained Tricia for us is with us today. It's Nancy McGovern sitting over there. She's the MIT Library's Head of Curation and Preservation Services. If you have any questions about NDSR, she knows all about it. And she knows a lot about this project too, because Nancy's working on this project with us as well. So it's so Nancy, Cate, Tricia, and I are working on the project, and we have many others from the MIT libraries now. We have staff members from the music library, from preservation, from metadata services, archive special collections, and IT people. In all, we have about 12 members of the libraries on this committee, on this DAMP committee. And there are several subcommittees too. So it's a very active group. They're really getting a lot done. But it's a real team effort. It's not the type of thing that I could, Cate and I in the music library would do by ourselves. We really need this kind of help. So it's really nice. But when you have this many people, you have certain issues with workflow. And when we first started talking about workflow, I thought, well, this is something maybe we can cover in 1 or 2 meetings. Little did I know how complicated workflow can be. And especially if you're writing out every step, from the time you take that reel-to-reel tape out of your special collection room, who's it going to go to next? And then it goes, we're sending it out to be digitized, and it comes back, who's going to treat it then? Each of these steps has to be documented. And so it's a project that we're working on actually for the MIT libraries in general too, because the libraries don't really have a written workflow for digital projects right now. And this is kind of a model that we'll be setting for other subjects in the MIT libraries in the future. So it's taking a long time to kind of set things up, but once we get it set up, it's going to move a lot quicker. So with that, I think I'll stop, but just a reminder that we're talking about a work in progress. Here, we don't have a fancy website to show you right now. What we're showing you is just the beginnings of how we're putting this together. And we're hoping that this will help other people, especially in bigger institutions where you have a lot of people involved, that what we're working on could be used in the future by other people and save them some of the steps that we're working on now. So that we'll be sharing out our experiences and documentation with you in the future. So with that, let me hand things over to Cate, and she'll tell you about her role in the project. Yep.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you, I'm leading with confidence here. Come on. My part of the project is more nuts and bolts, so I'm going to get down into the weeds with you all and explain a little bit about the material itself. So just to give you a little perspective, I'm actually dealing with 2 different types of collections in this inventory. One is an archives collection, and the way that archives collects material at MIT, there's a clear documentation. What are the rights? what are the contents in these 50 million boxes of each collection. So there's a lot less work for me to do. And then we had our own special collections in the music library. And that, oh, sorry, I should tell you this first. What we decided to do was to take these two different collections, you just make one big inventory. That way we could pool our resources, staff and donor resources. We could use one system to capture the inventory, and ultimately one workflow to handle the digitization process. So the Lewis Music Special Collections is, I'm thinking that this is probably something that happens in other music libraries too. So back in the day, reel-to-reel was king, and students used to come into the library specifically to listen to reel-to-reels. And then those got overtaken by cassettes and CDs, just easier formats for people to play. So what we had in our special collection room was these special recordings of different MIT groups, but also things that were older that were supporting course reserves. So we didn't necessarily have any rights to them or any interest in keeping them a part of this project. So the first step I had to do was, a dear friend of mine says, I had to get ready to get ready. So I had to go into the room and just sort of see what was there, move things around, determine what was in scope of this project, recordings that we would want to preserve and share digitally, and things that were really, we didn't need to preserve, that they were either already commercially released, or they were field recordings of faculty members, and we didn't have any rights to them. So it was a lot of just moving things around, dusting off shelves, looking at material, trying to figure out what was there. And just give you a couple shots of what it looks like. So I like this shot because it kind of showed different ways we were trying to keep things organized throughout the year. So we actually resorted to these little yellow Post-it sticky things to try and say, okay, at least here's a year range for things on this shelf. And there are little numbered stickers on each of the things. That number 3 in the corner, that's my work. I just decided I was going to number the shelves and sort it out later. And here's another shot. I love this because it's got the shoebox in there. I don't know if archives would go for that kind of thing. So then I want to talk to you about just the actual materials and resources we use to get this inventory somewhere we could share it. Thank you. So I had, company iPad, and we got it with a keyboard so that I could just move around. So then it gives me internet access. I can do a quick search on, some of the performers I wasn't familiar with. I could just do a quick internet search just to kind of get me in the ballpark of, what I was trying to determine. And it also has a photo capability, which is very handy too. I could take photos in the moment and then bring them to other people in the group, and we could talk about it. So just a great way to capture information. We decided to use barcodes to track things. Anyone heard of barcodes before? Okay. All right, so this is, we were imagining, we're trying to think through the whole process, even though we hadn't defined every step of the workflow, but we knew that things were going to be leaving the shelves and going out somewhere and coming back. And so this is, a handy way for us to keep track of everything. And we decided to, whenever possible, put the barcode on the object itself and not any kind of container that it was in case things got separated somewhere in the process. And now we're getting into the good stuff. So I think I'll have a handout. This is just a screenshot from a FileMaker Pro program that we're using to capture the inventory. And so we had great flexibility with this system. Our metadata librarian actually helped us come up with the different terms that we were trying to use to capture information. And I go through each section a little bit further. So in the top left, the collection, that's a drop-down menu, and so we're making a distinction between what's in our Lewis Music Library and what are different archive collections. That's a way to identify it. The ID number is generated by FileMaker Pro, so that's unique to every record that was created. The basic format is another drop-down menu, so we just, in broad terms, is this just audio, is it video, is it both, is it, we don't know. And the title, the rest of the information, I was just trying to get from what I had in front of me. So we're not actually playing these tapes at this stage because some of these are pretty fragile and we didn't want to damage them. So if there was information on the housing, I would capture it here. This is clearly a Lewis music collection. The archives, we had a clear documentation of rights, so we could say, yes, we know what we can do with this. And Lewis music, we have to do a little bit more research. But it was just a point to say, green light, red light for what we can do. And this here are some more drop-down menus, but just trying to get more specific information to help us make decisions on prioritizing what we want to send out to digitize. So we're trying to capture MIT performing groups. We had faculty members who are composing and recording, different visiting artists, that kind of information. Let's see, that's good. That's good. Then here, this is the actual object itself. So what is the barcode that's on the object? Where is it? I love this example because for some reason, just taking the information off these different boxes, somehow we ended up with 3 part 2s, and I don't know if we had part 1. It's not clear. We'll find it out later when we get the digital files back. So just whatever information I could find from the objects themselves. And then taking into account a later part of the process when things actually get sent out. There's another way to track it on this form. Okay, so after going through all the inventory, there's a lot of things in it. And, I thought, oh, great, we're done. Oh, wait a minute. Now what do we do? So we had a lot of things in each stage of the process where we thought, wow, we're getting so many answers now. We've gone into different people's offices, we've gathered up all these audio things, we put them in one place. We're golden. It got more and more complicated as we went on. What do we do with all these things? What happens once we send them out to digitize? Who's doing it? What are we even asking for? When they come back, how are we going to know if they did it correctly? Where are we going to stick these digital files? These are all sorts of questions that Peter and I started accumulating over time. And this is when the whole group that is working on this project really helped us out. And so we started looking at workflow and how these questions might be answered. So the workflow, I'm going to pass you over to Tricia now. And this is how I feel, passing everything over to Tricia. It's great for me. We've got the inventory. Ask me any questions about that. But what's going to happen now is workflow and Tricia.
Yeah, so you guys are about to see a lot of diagrams. It's exciting. So my piece of the project picked up after the selection of the physical inventory. And my focus was to document the workflow as we went along with this initial batch, and to take the analog audio materials through the digitization process, document the workflows to manage and preserve the digital audio, and then to contribute to the evaluation of an optimal audio streaming platform to facilitate access to the content. So I'm going to talk about why documenting the workflows was so significant and the kind of the benefits that it's going to have and has already started to have. Show some of the drafts that we've created, and you guys actually have one of the first ones we'll start with, including the textual documentation there. And then we're also going to talk about where we are in the comparative review of the streaming audio platforms, which might be pretty interesting to some of you guys that are probably dealing with those same ones. So as I just mentioned, I was brought in to collaborate with people across departments, content curators like Peter and Cate, curation and preservation services, reformatting, digital archives, to document the workflows for digitizing the analog audio materials. And then after they were digitized, I also began documenting the workflows for managing and preserving the digital audio. And finally, I worked with a group of people, Cate included, she's on the team, to evaluate a streaming platform. And I think a lot of people, myself included, and as kind of Peter mentioned earlier, embarked on this project thinking like workflows. I mean, that's not very complicated. We've been doing this stuff already. Every department kind of knows what they're doing. We basically got a workflow in place. I guess we could write it down if that helps. But as everyone began meeting and actually documenting the processes, the amount of work involved and the benefits of doing that work became pretty clear. So there have been many, and I'm going to touch on a few. So far mapping out the workflows has been clarifying roles and responsibilities throughout the process, the amount of work involved, sorry, I lost my place. Who executes them, who consults on the decisions and responsibilities. It's creating a more transparent process, which has been especially useful with special collections and archival materials because they're unique holdings and we don't want to lose any of them along the way. Before the process was condensed to like, I think you'll do that and pass it on to me and I'll do my part, and we don't really know the specifics behind what everyone's doing. And we now know exactly what people are doing, which helps us better track the materials and the actions, as well as exposing redundancies and inefficiencies. We're able to notice if some actions are occurring too many times or where processes can be automated, if a useful tool can be identified. And also with the tested and documented workflow in place, each time a project comes up, you have to sort of start from square one, unless you have some, stuff in place, like who do I consult now, who needs to sign off on this again, where are the parameters or requirements for this format, and so on. So with tried and true workflow documentation in place, it's going to help us start moving through the digitization and managing digital content part more easily, and we can move through larger batches and getting more content through these pathways. Finally, having a tested foundation in place is always attractive for funding because you have evidence that there's a plan and you know what you're doing. And then as for the evaluation of streaming audio platforms, obviously just digitizing the audio content's not enough. You want to make it accessible. So after managing and preserving the digital audio, we need a sustainable access platform that meets our requirements. All right, so this is the high-level workflow that Nancy and her team, a lot of it Nancy, designed prior to my arrival. And you can see there's a physical sequence, like the P sequence up on top, which is managing the actual analog materials. There's the A sequence, which is transforming physical analog to digital. And then there's the D sequence, which is the managing the digital. So my part of the project was focused on documenting the workflows for the individual stages, these individual bubbles, for A and D. So when as I go through this, you'll hear me say like A2 or D2, and that's referring to these individual bubbles. So I'm going to walk through the low-level workflows that I documented for each of these stages, and everyone can get a sense of what our processes are. And it's also, I'll share some resources at the end that are actually on the back. There's a link on the back of the thing that I passed out where you can get more information about these models. Okay, so, and this is the one you guys have in your hand. We begin with the first bubble, or the stage, it's the A sequence, A1, decision of whether or not to digitize. And this comes after the first sequence stage of, in the P1 of identify options for physical. So if an option has been, it's possible to digitize, we identify the content that's relevant, determine if it'll be added to the collection, and then sometimes you have a quick scan that someone needs, but you won't necessarily be acquiring it afterwards, so it would be like an ad hoc request. But if it's something that you want to preserve and add to the collection, you establish project parameters, scope, project, funding, staff resources, priorities. And you can see where we have these decisions called out in the documentation and then put into an A1 project document, which we actually, on our wiki, this is all on our wiki right now, it's not public yet, but it's like there are links to templates. That way when people want to pick this up, they can just go straight into it. And they're like, this is what I need to fill out, and this is who it needs to go to. So So these are all good foundational tenets that make this process a lot easier as we broaden our digitization initiative. We know exactly what to do. A2 is determining digitization requirements. So this is more technical stuff. You can see we call out different roles that participate in different actions, the rights group, content curators, curation and preservation services. And in this stage, we outline technical specifications that will need to be adhered to, whether the materials require special handling or tracking. And then we also have a stage 2, A2 project document as well. Then we move on to preparing the content to be digitized. So this is less about documentation. This is actually when you get into like physical procedures of packing it up, tracking the items, scheduling the big handoff of the materials. And you can see, instead of going into a bubble, we go into a handshake now. So it was really important to us, especially for special collections or archival material, because this is eventually going to be used not just for the digital audio, but for everybody. The handshake is important for those kind of materials because, like I mentioned earlier, you're letting go of your unique materials at this point. Like some of these are, only Lewis Music Library or the archives has them. And we need to be able to track along the way, like, okay, you guys have them now, we know where that is, we can audit that if it comes up. So the handshake stages are especially important. And then it moves on to curation and preservation services. And this was a huge one because this is actually where it gets reformatted or digitized. So it's actually, this is a slightly lower level one, and then it moves into 3 more detailed stages. Prepping to send to the vendor, the handshake to the vendor, back again, and then performing quality control measures once the materials and digital surrogates are back. And as I've generalized this workflow, I've been filling out specific digital audio use case. So for our digital audio, it just got back, our batch 1 that Peter was discussing just got back to us. And we've called out specific QC measures like checking to make sure it was in stereo, that we have WAV and MP3 files, that, different metadata that we ask for, the checksums that are there. And that way when we have digital audio stuff that comes through, we have the general workflow here, and then we can refer to our digital audio use case to make sure that it's aligned with what we've all agreed on already. In A5, prepare and return the original. Collections, preservation, and reformatting prepares the materials to be returned. And while the digital materials are passed down into the D sequence that I'll run through, managing the digital, the other stuff gets passed back to the content curators. And finally, they decide, documented earlier, whether or not they want to keep or toss the materials now that faithful digital surrogates have been made. And then we'll move into, I'll pass through the digital part real quickly. So like I mentioned, we have our first batch, and the digital audio stuff that we've been working with doesn't actually apply to these first 2 stages because this is for born digital stuff. But documenting the materials if they fall within the acquisition policy, calling out resources needed to manage them, negotiating submission agreements. Determining digital preservation requirements. Do we have a plan in place? What's our level of preservation commitment? If it's general collection stuff, not much, it's going to be temporary. But if it's archival or special collection stuff, that's stuff that we want to preserve long term, in which case we have to know what we're going to do, how often we're going to check fixity issues or checksums and things like that. This is where our batch 2 stuff, we just got digital files back from the stuff we had digitized. They go through this handshake down to the digital archivist. And we confirm transfer medium. Are we getting this through a directory, Dropbox, a hard drive? And we confirm that what we get is what was expected. In receiving digital content, there may be digital forensic steps performed in order to access the material. A sort of proto-submission information package, this is all kind of technical language, is created and put into submission storage. We assign an ID and audit the submission and transfer it to ingest. In D4, ingest and process digital content, the digital content manager conducts quality assurance measures, which we have differentiated from quality control. Quality control being, okay, the data that we asked for is there. Quality assurance being, is this audio okay to stream to people? And then it goes into temporary or archival storage. And then you have the ongoing actions that happen during managing digital preservation portion of the workflow. So like I said, checking fixity, which happens, every once in a while in temporary storage if it's for general collections, and more often and for a longer time in archival collections. And then, we don't have the last part. You can see the last part that's still grayed out. I'm still working on the draft of this. These are all in drafting forms. We've been going through them and just trying to make them general and get them so that everybody is on board with them. So they're still in work. But the last one is make digital content available. And that sort of leads nicely into talking about the platforms that we've been looking at. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention that a lot of this approach to the process has been based on models developed for the Digital Preservation Management Workshop that MIT's own Curation and Preservation Services Director, Nancy, is a part of. So if any of you guys are looking to work on some of the same stuff, developing workflows, tools, techniques, resources, you can go to this website, which, as I mentioned earlier, is on the back of the handout that we passed out. So you don't have to write it down. All right, so similar to our approach to the workflow, and I know this is hard to see, but I'll talk about it. The approach to identifying an optimal streaming audio platform has been to document our needs first and then find the tool that best fits those needs, as opposed to just grabbing something random and trying to adapt to it. This meant that we began the review by assembling a group that represented different stakeholders in the platform, a couple of technology people, content curator representatives, like Cate is on there, our metadata archivist, and it's really been like an intentional collaboration between the technological and organizational branches that are involved in streaming the audio. So the first phase was assembling a long list of potential requirements, and this is like less than half of those for streaming audio. And then we prioritized the requirements. So stuff on here, you can say like allows download of audio files. That wasn't huge for us because we really wanted it to be about streaming. Shows public view counts, allows fielded metadata search, anything from like broad requirements to really specific ones. And then the way we prioritized them was 4 is at the bare minimum it has to perform this, which is basically it has to stream audio. 3, 4, it really needs to be able to do this or we actually can't probably use it. 2, if it's required, but we're flexible about how the requirements met, maybe by another system, like discovery stuff could be met by another system. 1, if it's desired but not really required, and 0 for like, that's cool, whatever, but we don't really care. So then we went about collecting a list of contenders. You might recognize some of these. So this is a list we compiled by reaching out to other music library colleagues, reaching out to audio listservs, consulting with peers at MIT and at other places. And then we moved into the second phase, which was taking 20 of our highest priority requirements and some non-functional organizational requirements like would the system fit with our strategic priorities? What are explicit costs? What are resource costs? And we gathered all the available information we could find about these 7 ones, and we tried to eliminate about 4 of them before moving on to a full phase 3 review, because we didn't want to do a full phase 3 review on all 7 of them. So for Avalon, the current incarnation, version 3.3, I think is the last one released, doesn't meet or does not provide documentation for 7 of our 20 high priority requirements. We think it may end up being an option somewhere within the libraries in the future, but not during the time of this review. MIT's Tech TV didn't meet or have documentation for about 8 of our 20 high priority requirements. And it also didn't have the required flexibility or capacity for metadata inclusion that we needed right now. We're also not sure what its future looks like, like what the development is headed on it. And then Kaltura and ProQuest were each options that would have necessitated bringing out like a sales representative to give us more information instead of just having the open documentation right there for us. And for the scope of our review, we wanted open source, open documentation options to pursue. So currently we're documenting our reasons, the ones I named and more extensive ones, for not pursuing Avalon, Kaltura Media Space, Tech TV, and ProQuest. And then we're going to move into researching all of the functional and organizational requirements for these three. Access to memory, which is a product of Artifactual. It kind of works in tandem, like, or could work in tandem with Archivematica. Collective access, and DSpace, which you guys have probably heard before, the institutional repository at MIT and other places. And then we'll bring our recommendations to the department heads. So that's how that review has sort of been structured. So that's where the project is now, and before my part's over, in a few months I'll be generalizing the workflows further, fleshing out the digital audio use case so that we can use those for the specifics. I'll be making sure the digital content management workflow documentation is more robust, filling out a term dictionary for it, linking to resources and more templates for documentation. And we're well on our way to finishing the review. Oh, there's all this as well. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening to all those workflow things.
Is your streaming priorities document or the partial document anyway that you share, is that available somewhere? Or is that
I think that you can see those things in more detail. I can give you a blog where all of the NDSR residents have been talking about their experiences, and if you wanted to see the breakdown of those requirements more, I have screenshots of them on that blog. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris.
So one of the things I'm looking over is on the FileMaker Pro, and you have the documentation of rights. And one of the issues that we run into with music performances and like that, we have rights to 3 but not to 4. And I wonder if when you start documenting the rights, you break it down, or you just use an overall approach to what's going on, because rights are like 3 different things, right? Was it on campus, performed by an ensemble from the organization? So then you have that much in rights, and you can transfer those rights according to ASCAP and BMI onto other objects. But sometimes there are materials where you have rights for the first 3 things, and then you find out that there's somebody performing there that's not part of your group, is performing music that is not covered by any of your licenses, and you're stuck because there's no documentation of rights possible on the thing. So I'm just wondering if you had ever considered making that more granular.
No. What we decided initially is just to kind of make the distinction, like, do we have something signed or don't we? And that was easy with the setup now, because archives we do and music library we don't. It's going to come into play later as far as how we're allowed to share the digital files.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of pushing that along as far as we can. It's not holding us up from digitizing the material, because some of these tapes are just disintegrating. So we want to preserve the recorded. And then we have a whole team of lawyers and copyright people on campus who will help us decide how we're allowed to share it.
So that's going to be done in the D phase rather than this in the A phase.
That's phase Z.
Yeah.
It's later, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, once it goes towards the dissemination part, that's the rights assessment group, which I think they might be renaming themselves, but that's when they jump in and say, like, no, wait, don't put that out yet, or like, go ahead, yeah, put it out.
You mentioned you were looking off campus. Did you have to go off campus to get some of the music material back, or retrieve some missing parts or pieces that you wanted to have? Or?
We did, that was Kate's.
I call it the Where's Waldo phase of the process. So we knew there were recordings all over, and in some of the performance spaces, just in the basement, like a concert would be recorded, and they'd have it on reel-to-reel and just keep it on site and just stick it in a corner. And we got some recordings from MIT Museum. And literally from people's offices too. You know, they got wind of the project and they're like, oh, I've got this old box that's been sitting here forever. You want it?
And even in special collections, they have a lot of faculty collections. And some of the, there's some chemists or physicists who like music, and there might be 4 tapes in that collection. There's one in particular, there's a faculty member who, he played banjo and guitar, which I hadn't known. And so there are like 4 or 5 different tapes, family tapes of him performing music. So in that big collection, you have 4 small reel-to-reel tapes, but that's something that's kind of hidden. So Cate had to find some of those hidden collections too. Yeah.
At the outset of the project, when you were writing the grant or asking for outside funding, how did you determine how much labor this was going to take? Coming up with a formula based on numbers of recordings, based on, or did you just kind of?
We just got into it.
You just got
We just had enough money so we could hire Cate, and we figured this would be an ongoing
Right.
fundraising thing. So we're constantly in touch with donors to keep it going.
Yeah, because I'm just curious as to what percentage you think you'll be able to do. You're prioritizing everything.
Right.
So
We don't
you
know.
can't-
We
you can't
can't really
possibly-
tell. And what's tricky about this too is that the money is paying Cate right now. We haven't really got into paying for the digitizing process.
Exactly.
And that's going to
real
get expensive. So right now, we're spending all this time working on workflows and doing all this
Exactly.
preparatory work. Once we hit it, that we can start sending stuff through, then that's really going to eat away the budget. So it's really kind of hard to judge.
How granular are you going to get in terms of splitting files into tracks? I assume you'll end up with a file for basically one tape or one side of a tape for cassettes. At some point, is it going to be provision for splitting it into works and or movements? And as someone who's a cataloger, catalogs this kind of thing on an ongoing basis, I'd say at least a third, if not a half, of the things I catalog, what is performed is not necessarily entirely reflected on in the concert program. Things are moved around, pieces are added, pieces are taken away. I assume you've thought about this sort of thing.
Well, that's the quality control.
Yeah.
Tricia was talking about.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that there has actually been around funding and what we're sending through to be digitized, a lot of conversation that has come up around these are special collections things, should we listen to these things first, or risk messing with the tapes at all to make sure that what we're sending through, and then there's no, we shouldn't, we can't do that, we need to just send it through and then see afterwards what's there. And then there are people that could help, but we can't touch it, and we just have to
This is last question, one more question, and we'll move on.
It's really just extending that.
Yeah.
As of, our vendor is George Blood, and our digital archivist had lunch with him yesterday, and they agreed upon using the Smile so that they can actually do time coding metadata as opposed to chunking the file in their physical.
So, thank you again.